Nervous system. Your ability to perceive your surroundings, to see, hear, and smell what is around you, depends on your nervous system. So, do you have the ability to recognize where you are and to remember if you have been there before? In fact, your very capacity to wonder how you know where are you depends on your nervous system. So, what is nervous system? The nervous system is the major controlling, regulatory, and communicating system in the body. It's the center of all mental activity, including thought, learning, and memory. Together with the endocrine system, the nervous system is responsible for regulating and maintaining homeostasis. Nervous system has two main parts: the central nervous system, which is made up of the brain and the spinal cord, and the second part is the peripheral nervous system that is made up of the nerves that are branched off the spinal cord. The nervous system is involved in receiving information about the environment around us, sensation, and generating responses to that information, motor responses. The nervous system can be divided into regions that are responsible for sensation, sensory functions, and for the response, motor functions. And this picture shows the whole quick process. Every system in our body has a functional unit, which is the smallest but the greatest. In nervous system, it is the neuron. The neuron is the basic working unit of the brain, a specialized cell designed to transmit information to other nerve cells, muscle, or gland cells. They have three distinct parts or three essential parts, including a cell body, axon, and dendrites. Let's take a quick look about each part. Dendrites. The first two neuronal functions, receiving and processing incoming information, generally take place in the dendrites and cell body. Incoming signals can be either excitatory, which means they tend to make the neuron fire, generate an electrical impulse, or inhibitory, which means that they tend to keep the neuron from firing. 2. Cell body, also known as a soma. The cell body is the neuron's core. The cell body carries genetic information, maintains the neuron's structure, and provides energy to drive activities. And 3. Axon. An axon is a long, tail-like structure which joins the cell body at a specialized junction called the axon hillock. Many axons are insulated with a fatty substance called myelin. Myelin helps axons to conduct an electrical signal, which we'll be talking about just soon. Neurons generally have one main axon. Classes of neurons. Based on their rules, the neurons found in the human nervous system can be divided into three classes: sensory neurons, motor neurons, and interneurons. 1. Sensory neurons. Sensory neurons get information about what's going on inside and outside of the body and bring that information into the central nervous system so it can be processed. For instance, if you picked up a hot cooker, sensory neurons with endings in your fingertips would convey the information to your central nervous system that it was really hot. 2. Motor neurons. Motor neurons get information from other neurons and convey commands to your muscles, organs, and glands. For instance, that hot cooker that you have picked, the motor neurons innervating the muscles in your fingers would cause your hand to let it go. And 3. Interneurons, which are found only in the central nervous system. They connect one neuron to another. They receive information from other neurons, either sensory neurons or interneurons, and transmit information to other neurons, either motor neurons or interneurons. For instance, that hot cooker that you have baked, the signal from the sensory neurons in your fingertips would travel to interneurons in your spinal cord. Some of these interneurons would signal to the motor neurons controlling your finger muscles, causing you to let it go, while others would transmit the signal up the spinal cord to neurons in the brain, where it could be perceived as a pain. Neuron-to-neuron connections are made into the dendrites and cell bodies of other neurons. These connections, known as synapses. Synapses are the sites at which information is carried from the first neuron, the presynaptic neuron, to the target neuron, the postsynaptic neuron. The synaptic connections between neurons and skeletal muscle cells are generally called neuromuscular junctions, and the connections between neurons and the smooth muscle cells or glands are known as neuroeffector junctions. But to understand in which manner does these pulses transmit among synapses, let's talk about the action potential. Action potential are nerve signals. Neurons generate and conduct these signals along their process in order to transmit them to the target tissue. Upon stimulation, they will either be stimulated, inhibited, or modulated in some way. But what causes the action potential? From an electrical aspect, it is caused by a stimulus with certain value expressed in millivolts. So, an action potential is generated when a stimulus changes the membrane potential to the values of a threshold potential. The threshold potential is usually around -50 to -55 millivolt. It is important to know that the action potential behaves upon the all or none law. This means that any subthreshold stimulus will cause nothing, while threshold and suprathreshold stimuli produce a full response of the excitable cell. Neurons are more negatively charged because there are large gradients in ion concentrations. Why? Partially as a result of the action of potassium-sodium bump. And we have to note that the concentration of potassium is much higher inside of the cell than the outside of the cell. But the concentration of sodium is much lower inside of the cell than outside of the cell. And remember the two rules that ions move in from high to low concentrations and toward opposite charges. So the sodium-potassium bump uses energy to take the sodium 3 out and bring potassium 2 into the cell. So this process has phases. Let's start by phase 1. Hyperpolarization. Hyperpolarization is the initial increase of the membrane potential to the value of the threshold potential. The threshold potential opens a voltage-gated sodium channels and causes a large influx of sodium ions. Phase 2. Depolarization. During depolarization, the inside of the cell becomes more and more electropositive, until the potential gets closer the electrochemical equilibrium for sodium of 61 millivolt. This phase of extreme positivity is the overshoot phase. After the overshoot phase, the sodium permeability suddenly decreases due to the closing of its channels. The overshoot value of the cell potential opens voltage-gated potassium channels, which causes a large potassium efflux, decreasing the cell's electropositivity. This phase is the repolarization, which is the third phase, which purpose is to restore the resting membrane potential. Repolarization always leads first to hyperpolarization, a state in which the membrane potential is more negative than the default membrane potential. But soon after that, the membrane establishes again the values of membrane potential. So now we can understand more that the nerve impulse is transmitted from the axon ending to the target tissue by the chemical substances called the neurotransmitters of the synapse. This grand operation that humanity spent eras to understand takes place every nanosecond in our bodies. This video was done by Huda Atiya, and I hope you watched it and clearly understood it. And thanks for watching.